Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Goosebumps Series 2000 book review for you all. And it's book number 7, Revenge Are Us. I know a lot of you have been waiting very patiently over the years for me to finally get to reviewing this book. And I've mentioned since at least 2021 in Discord that as a kid, this was probably my most hated Goosebumps book, next to Go Eat Worms. And I've been echoing this for many years that Revenge R Us is a terrible book. And after rereading it as an adult, I can finally say that Revenge R Us is indeed a terrible book. But is it the worst Goosebumps book of all time? I would say it's definitely in the conversation. Now, it depends on what criteria we're using, but I would say it's definitely in the conversation. So, Revenge R Us is no short of its controversy. It's kind of an understatement to say this at this point of the Goosebumps community, but this book is probably the most famous, hated mainline book ever. Maybe next to like Monster Blood 4 out there in the community. And when a book from Series 2000, anything outside of the original 62, mind you, goes toe to toe with probably the most hated original 62 book, next to like Go Eat Worms, I could imagine. That's telling a lot that when this book is found by Goosebumps fans out there, majority of the time, they don't have hardly anything good to say about it. And to be honest, the most praise I've ever seen people give this book is that it's kind of mid or middling, but not the worst thing ever. So, when that is your highest distinction, you know you're cooked. This book is cooked. But why is this probably the most cooked Goosebumps book of all time? Well, let's discuss. So, Revenge R Us is technically a rehash of a original 62 book concept called Be Careful What You Wish For, which was book 12 in the original 62. And there's also some elements sprinkled in here from books like You Can't Scare Me. It's kind of like a weird amalgamation of You Can't Scare Me and Be Careful What You Wish For when you think about it. And those two books are not liked, for the most part, I should say. So you're making a recipe for disaster up front. In the story, I guess we're going to get into the plot of review. Yes, we're going to be talking about some spoilers because this book is so controversial. I'm probably going to lean heavily into discussion, so expect to have parts of the book given away here. If you haven't read the book before, I urge you now to go read it and then come back to this review so you can hear what I have to say. Well, the main character here is Wade Brill. Wade, I think, is like 12 or 13 years old, and within the first chapter, we get introduced to her life, particularly in her home life, where she has this 17-year-old older brother named Micah. And Micah, by far, is the worst sibling character, or worst side character, mind you, that I've ever seen in kids' horror. And I've come across some really terrible siblings and side characters in my time, like Brock from Casper: A Spirited Beginning, horrible human. We have Carl from Crybaby Lane, the Nickelodeon movie. He's awful. He might be the second worst older brother in the history of kids horror, next to Micah here. I know Tara the Terrible from Cuckoo Clock of Doom has a notorious reputation. I know Kermit from Monster Blood 3 has a notorious reputation. Nah. Nobody's touching Micah Brill. He is the definition of awful. Within the first few pages, Wade is having a, I guess, slumber party or get together with her girlfriends at her house. And Micah decides it'll be a fun prank to come out with Wade's underpants on around his head to, I guess, gallivant like a mask and embarrass her. And then, to make matters worse, he tries to go over to Wade to check to see if her Wednesday underwear is on, and tries to forcefully pull down her pants and rip her underwear off. And I think he actually does, which is really gross and way crossing the line for a kid's horror book. And yeah, off the bat, we understand that Wade is living in a household where she feels like she's being agonizingly tormented by her older brother. And this plays a huge, heavy hand in what happens later in the book. But the suffering does not stop there. Wade understands that her older brother Micah is after her diary. And he does these really mean pranks involving her, underwear and all this and stuff that he takes from her room because he's trying to find her diary, because for some reason that's been his biggest goal, to embarrass her for quite a while now. But she takes pride in the idea that she's hidden it very well and he's never going to be able to find it. Well, let's just say for poor Wade here, things do not get better. Her friend is having, a party one weekend, and she needs, a ride in the rain to go to the party, but her brother is at work, and then this other guy I think she's friends with that's older, named Carl, can't offer to, accompany with her to go to this party. So Wade has to put on this nice dress, her nice clothes and whatnot, her nice white shoes, and brave this rainstorm that's coming through. And her umbrella, has a mishap, and it causes her to get soaking wet, and her shoes are ruined by this deep puddle. And when she finally sees her brother's car pull up, he decides to pull over in a muddy ravine and splash mud all over her dress, and essentially just, mess around with her and not let her in the car. Even though, Wade really needs a ride, she begrudgingly has to, put up with him over this. And when she ends up at the party, she has to get changed in some new clothes, and she mentions to her friends that her brother is evil, but nobody ever seems to really believe her. Neither do her parents in the story. And when she gets home and she tries to explain what Micah did to her, her parents are like, oh, Micah would never do that. He's probably just joking around. And mind you, there's also this thing where I guess it happened on page or off page, I can't remember, where Wade's bike was run over by Micah, who was using the parents' car to go to work. And Wade is now bikeless, let's just say. And for the remainder of the book, she has to use her mom's bike. But that should just tell you the type of person Micah is. He does not care what he does to his little sister as long as it humiliates her, right? And the culminating event that sets this whole thing in motion is one day, Wade decides to go to the pool and, hang out with her friends. It's, I guess, the summertime in this book. So she wants to, go hang out by poolside, and her crush happens to be there. Well, it turns out somebody got on the intercom and announced that they're looking for Wade Brill. And it turns out to be Micah. And Micah's holding Wade's diary and decides to embarrass her by reading an entry about her crush. And this, of course, socially humiliates Wade to the point where she is beyond furious with him. And we have multiple examples of why Wade should be furious with Micah, right? So she stumbles across in her bathroom this ad in a magazine that says "Revenge are Us," and she gets the bright idea to finally, go for it, because she has no help with her family. She's never going to be able to outsmart Micah, it seems. And mind you, I should also mention there is another scene I overlooked. Wade sees an opportunity one day when Micah has this girl over, and they're drinking coffee, and she's explaining to the reader that Micah's a notorious liar, and he's just making up all this stuff to this girl to try to impress her. And drinking coffee is one of those things. And her mom is out trying to kill slugs in the garden. So she takes it upon herself to do a nice thing for Micah to, I guess, make him and her brother's girlfriend, I should say, a cup of coffee. But she's going to put some slugs into Micah's cup. Well, it backfires, because when Micah's about to drink it, her mom storms inside saying that she needs something to drink, and she drinks the coffee, and there's this whole disgusting bit with some slugs, and it's revealed that Wade tried to essentially poison her brother with slugs. And if you don't know, slugs are technically poisonous. Depends on how you ingest them. I know that wasn't Wade's intention. She just wanted to, humiliate her brother. But in the wrong, way, it could have possibly hurt him. So we get a sense that Wade isn't really thinking about what she's doing to her brother. She's more so just trying to look for anything she can do against him, right? Well, going back to the magazine thing, she recruits her friend Carl in this mission to ride their bikes over to this address on this Revenge R Us ad in the magazine. She ends up at this trailer park, I guess in town somewhere. She stumbles across this purple trailer where she thinks she's hearing screaming inside, but it turns out it's just this crow who's named Maggie. And her owner, Iris, is starting a brand new business on using, I guess, occult magic to, I guess, grant wishes for people. But she's looking for money. The sad thing for Wade is she doesn't have any money. But Iris agrees that because she's come this far and because she's, I guess, noticed something in Wade, she's willing to give Wade an experiment, or I guess like a free trial, to see if she likes Iris's service, to come back and actually be a paying customer. So Wade agrees. And it turns out that the first wish that Wade wants to make against her brother is to make him uncontrollably itch in the most inhumane way possible. And how this wish is carried out in each individual wish in the story is that Wade has to make the wish and then rub the back of the crow 3 times. We see a fake out with Iris, who I guess tries to make the wish, and then she's like, oh, wait. I'm doing something wrong. I can't be the one doing it, and it has to be you. So Wade is like, okay, well, it sounds kind of mean, but I'm going to do it anyway. So she makes the wish and she heads home. She's eagerly awaiting at dinner her brother to start itching, but because there's dessert, he's playing around with a fork, taking pieces of her dessert off her plate. She can care less. She just wants to see her brother start suffering. But nothing happens, and he heads upstairs to his room. And when Wade tries to put two and two together of what's happening, she goes up to her room, and then she starts uncontrollably itching. And the way it's described is super creepy. Her tongue is swollen. It's itching like uncontrollably. Her hands are throbbing. No matter how hard she's trying not to itch her entire body, it's causing her immense pain. And she tries to call Carl and get him to help, but he can't understand her on the phone. So she's like, well, okay, I guess I'm in this by myself. So she decides to go back to Iris's trailer to get this reversed. And when she goes there, Iris is like, oh, okay, well, let me get this fixed. I'm sorry that this backfired. And Wade's like, well, you still owe me a wish. And Iris is like, I told you that you get one free wish. And Wade's like, no, but you promised me that I would get my revenge. She's like, okay, well, I'll allow you a second wish. So Wade and her are coming up with an idea. And it turns out that her next wish is going to be that she wants Micah's hair to fall off and fall out in an embarrassing way. And Wade imagines the scenario, how it's going to play out. It's going to happen right in front of his crush. It's going to be great. It's gratifying, what have you. And she rubs the back of Maggie 3 times. And she heads back home to see what will become of it. Well, it turns out that things don't go as planned. And let's just say Wade decides to make a bowl of popcorn and, watch a movie for, just waiting around for her brother to have this freak out moment. But in doing so, she realizes that hair is sprouting on her body and it's starting to grow uncontrollably. And it grows to the point where she's having a hard time moving and breathing. And then she gets her friend Carl involved, and Carl sees her situation. Not knowing that it's actually her, he actually thinks that she's a monster and she's being followed by these dogs who try to attack her. And Carl's like, okay, well, let's get you back to Iris's. And they go back a second time. And, Iris is like, oh, I'm sorry, I messed up the wish again. Let me fix it. And then she's like, well, I'm sorry I keep messing things up. I want to make it right. Hit me with another wish. Wade's like, I don't know if I can do this. This is probably not going to be worth it. But Iris is like, here, I'll do you one better. Go home and make your wish. Maybe that's the secret ingredient. Maybe you can't be here to make the wish. So Wade's like, okay, whatever. So she goes home, and it's revealed that her parents are going out of town to the beach for, I guess, a few days. And Micah is going to be in charge of watching his sister. And it turns out that Micah has been trying to get some leverage on his sister. And he decided to go into her room while she was sleeping and drooling in her underwear and snap pictures of her in her underwear, which of course makes Wade really pissed off. And in retaliation, she makes a wish that she wishes that he would just disappear, right? So in doing so, Micah is like, all right, well, I'm going to take the car and go out for a little while. And Micah never comes back home. And the next morning, her parents, I guess, come to check on her. And they're like, where is Micah? And she's like, oh, I don't know where he is. And they think that she's trying to cover for him. But in reality, she puts two and two together. And she realizes that she made her brother disappear. And her parents go back off to, I guess, their vacation. And Wade's freaking out because she's like, I don't want this to happen. I got to fix this. So she tries to go to Iris to get it fixed. And Iris is like, I can't fix it. This is beyond my wheelhouse. But what I can have you do is go to this decrepit old house that my twin sister lives at. She has a more powerful crow named Minnie. And if you can get Minnie the crow and bring her back to me, then I can make this reversal happen. So Wade is like, all right, I guess I'm doing it. So she goes over to the house. I can't remember if she goes with Carl or not, but I think she goes probably by herself. And she ends up in the house, and she sees the crow, and she's going over to take it, but she sees somebody sleeping in the chair. She thinks that it's Iris's twin sister, and this sister wakes up. But when she wakes up, there's a plot twist, and it may or may not be involving Micah. And there's this big recontextualization that Micah perhaps has been in on this plan with Iris the whole time, and Wade has been bested. And the whole reason behind this was because Micah figured that because of all the horrible things he's done to his sister throughout, I guess, the events of the story here, that she would be seeking revenge, and seeing the ad in the magazine in her room prompted him to try to beat her to the punch. So, Wade is absolutely furious yet again after she went through this to try to save her brother. Her brother, yet again, humiliates her and has won. And this kind of breaks Wade's psyche a little bit, and she hatches this plan with this crow, which ends up just being a normal crow that was devised as a part of this plan, not magical whatsoever. And it's revealed at the very end of the story in the climax of what that entails. And let's just say Maggie, the actual magical crow, perhaps ends up in the possession of Wade somehow. And Wade gets one over on Micah. And we see certain things happen, like endless backflipping and contemplating on turning him into a slug and another creature that might be associated with water, let's just say. But somebody's not happy that Wade has Maggie, and it might be Iris. And when she comes back to reclaim her crow, Iris decides to act accordingly. And when we find out what happens to Wade and her brother, the story abruptly ends. So, then in a nutshell, that's Revenge R Us. So, I have some positives, surprisingly, with this book, given, what I said earlier on in the video. And I guess I'll go ahead and touch on them here, because I do think that there are some salvageable things about the story. Well, not the story, maybe just the book, constructively here. On the tone of the book, one thing I can really appreciate about this story is that it's basically Goosebumps' hardest attempt at dark comedy. And what I mean by dark comedy is something like a film such as Very Bad Things or Freddy Got Fingered, stuff like that. Films that are almost black comedy. Like, they're very serious things that normally aren't funny, but the delivery is what makes them humorous. There's moments in this book, I should say, that aren't supposed to be funny, but they're funny because you're either forced to laugh or cringe. And it's one of those situations that I think kind of works here. And to be honest, if a franchise like Tales from the Crypt, for example, had this story in their laps, I think that this story would fare well in that show compared to Goosebumps here. And the only reason why I think this book gets the reputation it does is because people don't necessarily see the novelty in the dark comedy aspects to it. Yes, it's not the greatest dark comedy ever. Most of this stuff isn't funny because of how poorly handled it is, but the potential of a great dark comedy is in this book, and I can clearly see it. And to conjoin with that, my second biggest positive with this book is that it has a really nice pace to it. There's a lot of moving parts in this story, and the story, does make some time jumps here and there, but when they do happen, it's to cut out the fat, it's to cut out the page count, and this is one of the better paced Goosebumps books out there, if I'm being honest. It's not the best written in terms of prose or monologue writing, but we do get some sort of a detailed monologue with Wade, as flawed of a character that she can be at times. So that was, I guess, nice and ingestible to read compared to everything else. And yeah, everything else I think absolutely is horrid about this book. And I can really go ahead and start off with the characters because holy crap, the characters in this book are awful. All of them are awful, minus like Carl. Carl's okay. Micah, the world's worst sibling. He is, I think, done on purpose this way to make us absolutely hate him. And I think it's done this way to make us forget, or I guess overlook, what exactly Wade is doing in the story at times. And I'll get to her very shortly. But Micah, he's horrible. The things that he does to his sister involving her underwear is beyond going over the line. It's awful. And he does it twice in the book. It's gross. It's unnecessary. Him humiliating her in front of her friends, in front of her crush, in front of pretty much the entire town that's at the public swimming pool. It's horrible. Him splashing mud on her on purpose to ruin her clothes. That's evil. Like, come on, man. This guy is a dick. There's no else how to describe him. He's just an absolute shithead. He's awful. One of the worst characters in kids' horror history, and definitely the worst character in Goosebumps. And I'd be shocked if there's ever a character that tops him. He's awful. The parents in this story are Dr. Maniac Will See You Now, Chicken, name it. All the bad parents in Goosebumps, they're here. they're so blatantly favoritists to Micah, it's almost irritatingly annoying. And because they never listen to Wade, they just fuel annoying parts of the story here. They're just sucky parents. Which brings me to Wade. I haven't even talked about Iris. I guess I'll talk about Iris. Iris, for her being a villain, she can't be a fun villain because she's involved with both parties here. Well, by parties, I mean Wade and Micah. On the surface, she's serviceable, but then again, we don't... I guess by the end of the book, we get that recontextualization with Micah being in on it with her, and thus, she's guilty by association, and she kind of comes across like maybe she's sabotaging Wade and fueling the meanness and the 118 pages that this book is, that is just literally dunking on Wade, which is awful. But, she's, I guess, by proxy, a bad character too. Maggie the Crow, cool concept for a wish-making story, but not utilized the best way. I think Maggie could have been the moral compass of the story, maybe judging the type of wishes you're making. Are you making wishes that are delivering fates worse than death to people, or are you delivering wishes to humiliate people? That's the dividing line of morality of this book when we break it down. Which brings me to Wade. Wade is easily top 5 worst Goosebumps protagonists of all time. I said it. And I know Wade has a fan backing because of how awful she's treated in this book. She almost has equivalently the same gravitas as a Sarah Moss from The Curse of Camp Cold Lake would have with readers, I feel. But the problem with Wade here, and I think this completely ruins the book as a whole, is that Wade is hell bent on revenge on her completely horrid older brother, but what she's doing is going against the reality of the situation. And let me break it down what I mean by that. Micah, when you think about what he's doing to Wade in the book, is just humiliating her. Yes, it's awful. Yes, it's super mean. But Wade feels emotionally that it is torment. It's abuse. So she wants her wishes, I guess, to be, at some times in the story, malicious. And at some times, she wants him to suffer. Not to humiliate him, but to suffer. Keep that in mind. Now, there are some wishes that could serve to humiliate him in the story. But the fact that Wade is willing to essentially give her brother fates worse than death or being erased from existence is a problem. Now, going back to Wade, we see throughout the story she has this moral compass that she tries not to cross the line with. And the main line is she doesn't want her brother to disappear. She doesn't want anything horrible to happen to her brother necessarily, like make him die or anything. And at the moment of the book where she thinks that her brother has disappeared and she's trying to make it right, she's legitimately trying to save him because she realized she crossed the line there with her wish. And she's trying to take it back. And she's willing to do whatever she needs to do to get it taken back. But when she discovers that Micah has won again, it triggers that part of her psyche that we have seen glimpses of throughout this book. And that is that Wade is no different than Micah. But Wade might actually be more emotionally messed up, or maybe actually more messed up in the head than Micah. And obviously this clouds her judgment and makes her, I guess, less smart or less cunning in the situation compared to Micah. And hear me out on this. Wade conflates humiliation with pain and torture. So she doesn't really understand how to go about her wish making. And when these things backfire on her, like the itching being like seriously horrible and agonizing, she wouldn't wish that on anybody. She can't believe that she wished that on her brother to begin with. It makes her kind of realize that that was awful. And then with the hair loss thing kind of, reversing itself and backfiring there, she realized that, maybe trying to humiliate him is just going to humiliate her, right? You would think that she's growing here. You would think that she's emotionally maturing. But by the end of the story, when she finally wields that power, you're like, okay, Wade, you should know better than anybody that now that you have the power, you don't need to abuse it. The first thing she does is that she makes him do endless backflips, which is obviously causing him pain. And he's like moaning and groaning that he's in pain from having to do this to his body. And she's just sitting there just like smirking at the crow. She's like, oh, you want it to stop? I'm going to turn you to a slug now and make you slimy all over. While she doesn't try to torment him and make Maggie, I guess, playfully try to pick him up and eat him or anything, it's implied that that could have happened. And she's like, you know what? You can't hear me. I want to make sure that you can communicate. I'm going to change you to a frog, right? We see her wielding this power, and she's getting power hungry now. She's completely consumed by revenge. Her psyche is broken. And perhaps that's probably the most relatable thing to her, is that we can kind of understand, her parents don't take her side. She can never beat this guy. Obviously, she is kind of cracked, but it does not work for this book. She doesn't learn the actual lesson that should be learned. And the book tries to offer the moral, which is revenge is bad, right? And I think a lot of people have had a problem with that over the years because it feels forced in there and it's undeserved for Wade. But I would actually argue against that. No, I think that revenge is bad is earned here for Wade, because once you really sit down and think about what she's doing, the moral does fit. and she does kind of deserve what's coming to her. So yeah, the characters suck in this book. That's probably the biggest glaring problem with the story. If it's not the loose logic here, I guess we'll go back to positives one more time. The logic in this story is kind of wonky, and the inciting incident is completely random, like the whole magazine ad. But the story has its rules, right? And it, for the most part, sticks with them. My biggest problem is the last minute twist involving this 3 wish limit thing that is mentioned by Iris to be the causation of what happens to Wade. I think is just out of left field, and it's just in there to, you know, give a crappy ending to Wade. And honestly, when you look at the story overall, all the story is, like I said, is just crapping on Wade the entire story. And it's not fun to read. This book is not fun. It's trying to be a dark comedy, but it's not funny because you empathize with Wade. You don't want her to constantly lose. And in a story where you're geared up to want to root for the underdog and the underdog doesn't win, you have to historically go the Rocky route with that, or, you know, make it seem like second place is just as good as first place, like Bring It On, for example. But this book just doesn't succeed at that. It doesn't have the heartwarming nature that a book like this should have. This should have been completely restructured, rewritten, just on the execution alone. The concept as is fine, but really what sinks this book is the characters and just the repetitive nature of just constantly crapping on the main character. This is a mean book. It's ugly. It's reprehensible in all the most unforgivable ways possible. And it's not bad in the traditional sense where it's intelligence insulting for me, or it's not bad because it's just, you know, one big steaming pile of random dung. This is just an abhorrent book, right? Structurally, it's fine, but it's just so morally reprehensible that you have to hold it to some contempt. And that's how I feel about this book in a nutshell. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, y'all, I hated this thing, but I don't know if I'm going to say it's the worst Goosebumps book yet, at least in terms of the mainline books. I do think that I hate a couple of short stories and Give Yourself Goosebumps books more than this, and possibly even other mainline Goosebumps books more. But I'm going to give it a grade that I think is deserving of, and I'm going to give it an F. And because of those things that weighed heavily for my enjoyment here, I was very hefty on the deductions here, and I deducted pretty much 2.5 points just off the characters alone. And for the ending and all of that kind of adds up to another point. And I gave this book a 1.5 out of 5 stars. This is an F tier. This is one of the worst Goosebumps books of all time. Easily a top 10 mainline Goosebumps book. Top 10 worst contender here. Like I said, you know, when I get to the overall, you know, series ranking for every single series of the franchise included, this is going to be down there. And I wouldn't be shocked if this is the dead last book for me for Series 2000. But I still got a few more to go. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Revenge R Us. Let me know down in the comments section if you've read this book before. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What's your thoughts on it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.